You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Then welcome to the big show, as always. We got the buttons in the wrong place today. Welcome to the big show. As always, the Chris Voss Show has been around for 16 years and over 2,000 episodes. And we're joined by our most frequent guest, Thom Harmann, today. He's going to be talking about his latest, hottest book that's just flying off the shelves and everything that goes into it. It comes out October 8th, 2024. It's called The Hidden History of the American Dream, The Demise of the Middle Class, and How to Rescue Our Future. It's part of the Thom Harmann Hidden History series, so that we can all learn about stuff and everything else. Thom Harmann is the 4-time Project Censored, award-winning New York Times best-selling author of over 25-plus books currently in print and over a dozen languages in 5 continents. He's known internationally as a speaker on culture and communications, an author and innovator in the fields of psychiatry, ecology, and economics. He has, of course, got a wonderful radio show that he runs. We'll get into some of the details of that. Welcome to the show, Thom. How are you?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me back. I'm great.
There you go.
I hope you are.
I am excellent. It's wonderful to have you back as well. Thanks for always joining
Hello.
the show and you're our most frequent guest. We're going to have to come up with like an SNL type robe or something that we give away on the show for the most frequent guests. So give us your .coms. And I think I didn't see on your Amazon your radio plug. So if you want to plug that in the about for you, that'd be great. Thom? Uh-oh. Looks like we got some bandwidth issues on the internet. The internet's not going to get along with us today, evidently, or at least on Thom's end. So we'll have him rejoining here in a second, and when he does, we'll put this portion of the show in editing. There he is. Thom is back. There you go. Welcome back, Thom.
I don't know what happened.
I think you're, you know, we mentioned you have a censored award thing. I think you're trying to censor you again.
I don't get it. We've got, commercial internet here. We pay a fortune for it, so it should work. I don't get it.
You gotta love it. So give us your plugs and your radio show, your YouTube channel, and .coms, wherever people can find you on the interwebs.
Well, the show, the main website for the show is thom.tv, thom.tv. The main website, or the website where I write an article every day, and it's free, is hartmanreport.com, Hartmann with 2 N's. And thomhartmann.com is, kind of a legacy website, but it's still there, and it's got a lot of good information on it. So
there you go.
About it.
And you do how often do you do your radio show? Do you do it daily?
3 hours a day, 5 days a week. We're on Sirius XM and commercial stations and Pacifica stations all around the country, and we're also streamed live on Free Speech TV.
And I love your show because you get into the deets, you get into details. The deets, as the kids say them, details, and you break everything down, and you do it in such an amazing way. And then of course you guys have this great newsletter that comes out that has it's probably the richest newsletter when it comes to links and references, facts.
That's Sue's Stack, yeah.
Yeah, it's great. So your newest book that you have out, let's talk about that and what's inside of it. Give us a 30,000 overview of that, if you would, please.
Well, the book is titled The Hidden History of the American Dream, and it really tracks what the American Dream is, how it came about, where it came from, what happened to it, and how we can get it back. I think that you could argue that the seeds of this were planted around the time of the American Revolution. Adam Smith wrote a book called Wealth of Nations, which everybody knows about, but his more important book in my mind was A Theory of Moral Sentiments. And that book, he basically argued that government can and in fact should intervene in the marketplace to support the general welfare. as opposed to an unregulated capitalist marketplace where basically the rich just get richer and richer and richer, and you end up with the kind of society that Charles Dickens wrote about in most of his novels, where you have a 1% at the very top who own about 90% of all the wealth. Then you have a 3 or 4 or 5% middle class, which is doctors, lawyers, and shopkeepers. And like Ebenezer Scrooge in Christmas Carol was actually, he owned a small business. It was so small he only had one employee. He was the middle class. And then the bottom 95% are the Bob Cratchits, the desperately poor who can't even care for their own Tiny Tims, their kids.
Yeah.
So
let them eat bread. Or
right.
Let's see. There's no bread, let them eat cake.
Right. So Smith said you could fix this, with government intervention in the marketplace. We didn't really try that until 1933, when Franklin Roosevelt came into office. About 15% of us were in the middle class. And he said that he wanted to set out to bring more than half of America into the middle class. And so we got unemployment insurance and a minimum wage and the right to unionize and Social Security and, all these programs of the New Deal that actually did that. When Reagan came into office in 1981, 2/3 of us were in the middle class. Reagan then set out to reduce the size of the middle class, and there's a fascinating backstory to that, and was quite successful. We're down to around 43% of Americans are in the middle class, and now it takes 2.3 salaries to accomplish a middle class lifestyle that you could have accomplished in 1981 with a single paycheck.
Yeah.
And the other point that I opened the book with is that when I'm a boomer, when my generation was in our 30s, we controlled 21% of the nation's wealth. The generation that is currently in its 30s, the millennials and Zers, control only 4.6% of the nation's wealth. And that's the direct result of 43 years of Reagan's policies.
Yeah. The trickle-down economics. I'm still waiting for my check is a joke I've been doing for a lot of years.
Exactly.
In fact, I predicted, watching the middle class start to fade 20, 30 years ago. I remember reading articles 20, 30 years ago where the boomers, they'd amassed a lot of real estate wealth, investment wealth, and as their Gen Xer, I think, children started inheriting some of it, they were liquidating those assets and buying rims and cars and stuff. And you wrote a lot about this in your book, The Hidden History of Neoliberalism, How Reaganism Gutted America. I remember we talked about that.
Yeah, that's kind of the backstory to it. That's the whole story of why Reagan set out to destroy the middle class. But this book is how we can reverse it.
Yeah, there was an article on December 17, 2020 on CBS News.com. 50 years of tax cuts for the rich failed to trickle down, and economists have gone through and done. So, I guess that check isn't coming from Ronald Reagan. So
no, it was a lie, and they knew it was a lie. It was just, they just wanted to give a giant tax cut to their billionaire buddies.
Yeah, and I mean that was part of, that's part of what grew out of the Great Southern Strategy and the flipping of the unions to the Democrats and all that sort of thing, wasn't it? They were trying to.
It was. It was also Jude Wanniski's two Santa Claus theory, if you're familiar with that.
No, tell us, please.
Okay. In 1978, Jude Wanniski was a Republican strategist, and he proposed this in the pages of the Wall Street Journal. And what he said was, ever since the 1930s, Democrats have been thought of as Santa Claus. They brought us, unions and unemployment insurance and all these wonderful things, Medicare, et cetera. And Republicans have always said, no, Republicans didn't want Social Security. They didn't want Medicare, et cetera, et cetera. And so he said, the GOP has always been seen as Scrooge, and the Democrats have always been seen as Santa. So what we have to do, we Republicans, is we have to do two steps. Number one, we have to become Santa. We have to figure out how to become Santa Claus. And number two, we have to force the Democrats to shoot their Santa in the face. And his strategy for this was, keep in mind, this is 1977. He said, the next time a Republican becomes president, now we had been steadily paying down the national debt. When we ended World War II, our debt was 132% of GDP, which is about where it is right now. Massive national debt. And 4 presidents paid that down to the point where when Reagan came into office, our national debt was only $800 billion, not even $1 trillion. And we were on course to pay off the entire national debt within the next 5 years. And so anyhow, what Jude Wanniski said is, the next time a Republican comes into office, spend money like a drunken sailor. Just pour as much money into the economy as you can from the government coffers, do deficit spending, run up the debt. And that will have a couple of effects. Number one, it'll stimulate the economy, and everybody for years and years will say, holy cow, that guy had a great economy. And number two, by throwing the nation into debt, you set it up so that when the inevitable Democratic president comes along, you can yell and scream about the national debt and force the Democrats to shoot Santa Claus, to dial back on their welfare programs, to cut back on Social Security and Medicare and defund their own programs. And every Republican president since Reagan has followed that, which is why you have a $35 trillion national debt. 100% of our national debt can be attributed to the policies of 3 Republican presidencies.
Wow.
Reagan, Bush, and Trump. If you just look at the tax cuts from those 3 guys, that's $35 trillion right there. Not to mention the excessive spending that they engaged in. So, the two Santa Claus theory is alive and well.
Plus, some of those are inflation, and most of that is inflationary too. I mean, right now we might end up losing an election because of Trump's tax policies. To go back to him again, which I imagine he'll run up the debt again for his Elon Musk buddy. But yeah, it's inflationary, and so everyone sits around and complains about inflation right now under the Biden administration, which a large part comes from COVID and the spending we did there, but also from the Trump cuts. I mean, there are larger tax cuts. They were the largest.
Yeah, Reagan never got inflation below 4.1% in his entire 8 years, and everybody's whining and complaining. I mean, inflation right now is at 2.7%, and they're going, "Oh my God, Reagan did so good," and this is, come on, give me a break.
It's interesting. I'm gonna look up that. What is it called again? The ghosts?
Two Santa Claus theory. If you just plug my name and 2 Santa Clauses into any search engine, you'll. I've written about it many times.
All right. Well, that explains what that was, because I kept waiting for you to send me a present at Christmas.
Oh, here we go again.
That's what that was. I'm like, why has Tom forsaken me at Christmas? Yeah. Anyway.
There you are. Yeah. Did you get what I said? Just plug 2 Santa Clauses and my name into any search engine, and it'll pop right up. I've written about it.
There you go. That's why I always assumed it was you that was going to send me a present, but now I understand it was Republicans and all that. So, Tom, you tell us how we can rescue our future. How can we save ourselves from ourselves?
Well, it's not like we don't know how to do this, because we did it before. I mean, like I said, when FDR came into office, 15% of us were in the middle class, and when Reagan came into office and took a meat axe to the middle class, it was 66% of us. 65% of us. So all we have to do is bring back those policies, end free trade, go back to a relatively protectionist trade policy, bring our factories and our jobs back home, number one. Mm-hmm. Number two, raise the top tax rate on the morbidly rich back up well above 50%, at least 74%, in my opinion. And number three, raise the tax rate on profitable corporations, so the top tax bracket, back up to 50%, which is where it was when Reagan came into office. It was 51%.
Should we maybe get rid of some of that offshoring that they do? Like Apple having headquarters.
Get rid of free trade, and the offshoring. And this is the one thing that Trump has right, is that tariffs are a big part of that. And interestingly, as much as Democrats are running around bashing him for his tariff policies, Biden has imposed numerous tariffs in the last 3.5 years. And kept most of Trump's tariffs, because the tariffs work. So it's just that Trump did it stupidly. You don't just throw a bunch of real high tariffs out and just slap them around. I mean, that just starts trade wars. You do it carefully, you do it thoughtfully, you do it step by step, you do it in a way that is designed to last 20, 30 years, so that when people build a factory in the United States, they know that, that's going to last. The tariffs are still going to be there to protect them. So there's that. We need to bring back unionization. And we need to raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour.
Yeah. It seems like it's getting there. I mean, I'm seeing some crazy payouts of what things are per hour now that people.
But every red state, or virtually every red state, is still at $7.25.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Now, Trump's pushed a new tariff plan. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like I said, I'm in favor of tariffs, but I'm not in favor of the way that Trump does them. He's talking about, 20% tariff right across the board on everything, and 100% tariffs on something. Tariffs, like all taxes, have 2 purposes. One is to raise revenue, but the other is to influence behavior. And with tariffs, 90% of the effort is to influence behavior. And And the behavior, of course, is to get companies to shut down their factories in China or stop buying from Chinese manufacturers and start building factories in the United States and making things here. And for that, you have to know that the tariff is going to be around for a couple of decades so that you can recoup the investment in your new factory, which means that you really want to have a national discussion about it. You want to create a consensus. You want to get everybody on the same page. This tariffs have been a big part of our national conversation from the founding of the republic. The first tariffs were put into place by the George Washington administration. Substantial tariffs, really big tariffs actually. And in fact, the 100% of the cost of the federal government was paid for by tariff revenue from the Revolutionary War, or the time of the Revolution, all the way up to the Civil War. It was 2/3 from the Civil War to World War I, and it was 1/3 from World War I to World War II. And it was after World War II that we started dialing back on tariffs. And then in a big way with Reagan. I mean, Reagan, the Reagan administration negotiated NAFTA and the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, which led to the World Trade Organization, the WTO. So I would just reverse all that, but I would do it carefully, methodically, thoughtfully, basically the way Biden's doing it right now.
There you go. It's funny, people complain about inflation, but then, I mean, it sounds like if Trump were to win the election, it would definitely lead to more inflation for prices that consumers are going to get. Even the GOP, even GOP's Rand Paul says, American shoppers are going to bear the brunt of Trump's tariffs if he gets reelected.
Yeah, if you impose it's functionally a sales tax, and if you impose a large, sudden sales tax, you will produce inflation. There's no way around that. It'll take a couple of years to wring it out of the system.
So all the people complaining about inflation will get more inflation by voting for Trump. Good job, people. Way to go.
Yep. There you go.
You can't fix stupid. Stupid is
these people are just geniuses, aren't they?
Oh God. We were supposed to. I think the original idea behind the Federalist Papers, the Madison's Federalist Papers, was that we were supposed to send our brightest and our smartest people to Congress. Wasn't that originally?
Yeah, Hamilton wrote about that, and I think Federalist 56 was the one where he said that the Electoral College would guarantee that we would never have a scoundrel as a president, men of low moral character.
Wow, and look how far we've come. So speaking of that, we are 2 weeks away from the election. If you're watching this YouTube video like 5-10 years from now, like people do, please don't write me on the comments that it's not that time right now. But it's 2 weeks before the 2024 presidential election. We just had Alan Lichtman on the show. He's the famous guy you see all over TV making the 13-key prediction. He seems to think that Vice President Harris is going to win. You want to air your thoughts on who's going to win the election here in 2 weeks?
Well, I hope she wins, because if she doesn't, we're going to be a very different kind of country. A year from now, we will no longer be the United States of America. We will probably be in a civil war, and people like you and me, Chris, will probably be in internment camps. I mean, it took Hitler. He was sworn in on January 30th, 1933, and by the first week of March, he had built Dachau, and it was solely for political prisoners. I mean, it was just for his enemy within. It was mostly, there were members of Parliament, of the German Parliament, leaders of trade unions, but mostly newspaper publishers and editors and commentators who had spoken poorly of Hitler. Oh, yeah. That's who he went after first. I mean, it wasn't first he went after the Jews. The Jews came much later.
And he's using that same language. My enemies, I tend to persecute my enemies. I want to be an authority.
He wants to go after Adam Schiff. He wants to put Mark Milley in front of a firing squad. Yeah.
Wow. And even John Kelly warned that Trump would rule like a dictator, and that's his chief of staff. I mean, there's a picture that I think MSNBC has out of all of the administration officials that worked under Trump that have called him a danger to American democracy, and it's a huge shot of a lot of pictures.
Yeah, and John Kelly was not some bleeding heart liberal. He was the guy who implemented the child separation policy down at the southern border. He was the director of Homeland Security at the time. Then he became, I don't recall the order, but he was also for 2 years Trump's chief of staff. He was one of the men closest to Trump, but and then after he left government, he joined the board of directors of the private prison company that ran the facilities where they were keeping the children. that had been torn from their parents. So this guy is no bleeding heart liberal. He just doesn't want a fascist running the country.
Did you ever think you'd see? Did you ever think you'd see Dick Cheney coming out for Democratic president?
No.
Did you ever? Was that on your bingo card?
Never occurred to me. But
Never occurred to you.
It's a
Darth Vader, Mr. Halliburton, no contract.
I know. I'm wondering why George W. Bush hasn't. I'm guessing that he's afraid. I think most of the Republicans who are not speaking out are not speaking out because they're afraid that the chance Trump will win and he'll come after them next. Yeah. And they're, enough of a student of history to know that it really could happen here.
W has claimed that he's not into politics anymore. He's mostly painting, and avoiding being seized in international companies for.
Well, it's possible he's sliding into dementia or something like that. I don't know. But.
I voted for him in his first term, and I'm pretty sure he started then.
Really?
Or it was the drinking. Yeah, I was a Republican and voted for W, and then I was so embarrassed by him. For some reason, I'm a weird person where if I vote for someone, I hold them accountable, and I hate half of what they do and love half of what they do. Like I voted for W and did that. 9/11 really changed me and woke me up to what was going on in the world and made me go, people hate us? Why? And started learning stuff. And then I started, the religious part of W. Bush. I think when he banned testing on fetuses or whatever it was, to where you couldn't test them for medical purposes, use them for medical purposes, I was like, I'm out. And it was clear that religion was running that administration as well as Dick Cheney just doing whatever. I call it the President Dick Cheney administration, really.
Yeah. Well, W was the guy who brought the religious freaks into the Reagan administration. He was the guy, he brokered that deal between Ralph Reed and Jerry Falwell and Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Then we had the Tea Party, and which led us down to the road to Trump. It's just a slippery slope that we've been on. What are your thoughts on, we could all sleep nicely thinking Kamala Harris is going to win, Vice President Kamala Harris is going to win. There's the prospect of another January 6 2.0. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's probable that there will be some protests, shall we say, in some of the states, particularly around some of the counting facilities. I don't think they're going to get very far. I think with the possible exception of Georgia, I think which has a Republican governor, I think pretty much all the other swing states have Democratic governors. So I'm not so concerned about that. My concern is that they're going to manufacture some sort of a legal excuse to get this before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court could declare that there's enough problems with the election that they're going to throw it to the House of Representatives under the 12th Amendment, in which case each state gets one vote. And there are 27 states controlled by Republicans. So, it would be 27 to 23 in favor of Trump. And Trump becomes president. And there's a lot of precedent for that. I mean, it's how Thomas Jefferson became president. It's how John Quincy Adams became president.
I did not know that. This is why we have you on the show. You are the central knowledge base for everything, Tom. So maybe not another January 6th where it's at the Capitol, but maybe in local.
No, I think it'll happen in the states, and I think it's going to happen around counting the vote. They're all in on claiming voter fraud. I mean, this is why the Republicans, when they controlled Pennsylvania in 2020, passed a law saying that you can't even open the ballots to count them, the mail-in ballots, until after the election is over, guaranteeing that the largest swing state in the country, Pennsylvania, which is probably what it's going to come down to. Pennsylvania is going to be like Florida in 2000, guaranteeing that we won't know the results until at least Wednesday and probably Thursday. And the Republicans did this intentionally because they are looking to set up an excuse to bring in the Supreme Court and to cause people to question the outcome of the election.
If you can't win on good ideas, just try and just seize power.
Yeah, just cheat.
I was really surprised she didn't, Vice President Harris, she didn't announce Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, as a
Yeah, I
thing.
was
But
too.
you really in fact, I was betting, I was predicting it, and so I look stupid. But uh, and Tim Walsh is a wonderful gentleman, Governor Tim Walsh. I think he's a great guy. But Josh is so much more slicker.
Mhm.
He's almost like Newman or the California governor. I don't know why
Right.
I'm having trouble with names today. The
Yeah,
brain's
you,
going
you
clearly.
just chased it out of my head too. Gavin Newsom. Yeah.
Gavin Newsom. And he's so slick. And when you watch the vice president debate, which I don't think changed anyone's minds,
Yeah.
I mean, Tim's a down to earth. He's a good guy, but maybe
Mhm.
somebody slicker would have been better. And I'm thinking if Harris loses Pennsylvania or loses the election to Pennsylvania, flipping to Trump, that may be one of the things, like Hillary Clinton, you got to go walk in the woods and think about shit like why you didn't go to Wisconsin once or something.
Yeah.
Maybe she should have put Josh Shapiro. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I mean,
I
that's got
don't
to be.
know. What I heard from people who were kind of on the inside, who would not talk publicly but were willing to talk to me, was that Josh Shapiro was just a little too ambitious. That this was a guy
Ah,
who wanted to be president someday, and they and what Kamala Harris wanted was really a teammate rather
mhm,
than a competitor. And I can understand that. I mean,
yeah,
it makes a lot of sense.
yeah. So we know he's running against her in 2028 if everything works out well.
Could be.
It will be interesting, and it's kind of funny. It seems like there's some decline going on with Trump here at the last fucking second. Evidently,
Hmm.
he's been canceling stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, what an irony if he gets in office and he's really hits the wall. And of
Well, the
course,
billionaires who are behind him, they don't want Trump in the White House. I mean, they
mm,
don't really give a rat's ass about Trump or not Trump, other
yeah,
than they know that he's unstable and unpredictable, and he could do things that it would really harm their business interests,
yeah,
even inadvertently. They want J.D. Vance, and J.D. Vance
oh,
is the wholly owned creation of a handful of right-wing billionaires, immigrant right-wing billionaires at that.
yeah,
And so I'm expecting that either, if Trump wins, either he will be essentially a figurehead. They'll prop him up every now and then in front of a teleprompter like they do with Reagan. I mean, we now know
mm,
that Reagan was full blown Alzheimer's by 1985.
wow,
And so he was, basically George Herbert Walker Bush was running the country for the last 3 years of the Reagan administration.
wow,
And so either they'll do that, or if JD Vance really wants to, pull the strings, he'll invoke the
okay,
25th Amendment
yeah,
and say, the president is no longer capable of running the country, get the cabinet to vote with him, and boom, we're off to the races. JD Vance
yeah,
is president. And if he does that, it'll probably be in the third year of his presidency, because then you can serve a maximum of either 2 terms or 10 years. Uh,
oh,
under the amendment, I forget which amendment it was, that 2 term to the president. And so if he waits until the third year, then he'll have the third and fourth year of this presidency, and then he can get elected to a 4-year term, and then he can get reelected to a second 4-year term, serving a total of 10 years. And he's only in his 40s now, I think.
yeah. He's pretty young.
Yeah.
He's still got that goth look going on.
Yeah. Well, he's
I
still
love
wearing
how
eyeliner.
Yeah, I love how we're electing two people from a party that claim to hate LGBTQ and transitional people and what do they call them? Where they do the they do the reading. I'm just losing all sorts of references today, but basically, we have two of these guys that wear makeup.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. Tim,
They're
Tim,
like,
or I mean, JD is wearing eyeliner, and Trump puts enough pancake crap on his face that
oh
it's
yeah,
almost like he's in blackface.
we got two guys that wear makeup and they hate LGBTQ people, and
Yeah,
you're just like,
makes no.
what's going on there? What else is gonna plug you about? Well, I had you. Yeah, Alan Lichtman was on the show. You're the second person to confirm that JD Vance is probably the future of the party, and I
Yeah,
forget the billionaire behind him in Silicon Valley,
Peter Thiel.
Peter Thiel. Yeah, and he's just an acolyte of Peter Thiel. It's amazing how Peter Thiel
Yeah,
has just built him and installed him where
yeah.
he
Thiel
wants
put,
him,
what was it, 12 million, I think, into his race in
something
Ohio,
like
and
that.
basically
Yeah,
bought the election for him.
yeah, and built his career for him so that he
Yeah,
could get
yeah.
into the White House.
Start a venture capital
And
firm. Yeah.
yeah, and with books like yours that tell people how it is and what's going on and stuff, I mean, we need to realize that the future of where we're at is if we don't change it, then as you say, how to rescue our future, we're going to end up farther into an oligarchy than ever before, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. In fact, didn't you do a book on oligarchy?
I did. And you and I discussed it.
This is and you were on the show. This is your 6th appearance on the show. You've got so many books.
Wow.
I'm just assuming you've written about everything. So
Yeah,
I may just
not
do
quite.
the reference. So Tom, give us your final thoughts as we go out on the show, on the book, where people can pick it up, and your .coms and plugs and all that good stuff.
Sure. Well, the book is The Hidden History of the American Dream. You can find it anywhere, a local bookstore, online, whatever. And it's out now. And my websites are thomhartmann.com, hartmannreport.com, and tom.tv.
There you go. And the books he has in the Hidden History series, they're very kind of thin and easy to read. They're a quick read. You can get right to the data. They get right to the point. And so I love the little books you put out there, Tom. It's great for the reading and stuff. And people should always check out your show. Your show is just brilliant that you put on. I'm jealous. When I grow up, I want to be you.
Thank you, Chris.
On our little podcast here. Thank you, Tom, for being on the show again. Thanks, Mounts, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Facebook.com/Chris Voss, and Chris Voss on the TikTok, Talkity, Chris Voss 1, I think it is. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you